Okay, so broadly what I want to speak about today is what we call this term the experience advantage. And the reason for that is it's about building experiences that make you stand out from your competition. I want to start off with, we can skip past the next slide because I've already asked this question of you all, but if we go 2 slides forward, Cindy.
Sorry. Sorry, technicalities. I was supposed to
Technical
record.
issues. So we'll quickly cover what we call the experience advantage formula, but I won't spend too long on this because I want to hone in on 2 or 3 specific areas of that formula for today. And we're going to move on to talking about moments that matter most in your business, how you can get a measure on that from a customer's perspective. And finally, like I said, why focusing on strategy, focusing your strategy on experience is really important. And we'll finish up with some questions. If we move forward a couple of slides, already done this one. So like I said, the experience advantage formula is based around 6 elements that will help you stand out from your competition. What we find that is that any business that stands out in any industry really nails these 6 elements in one shape or another. The first one is to have a really clear purpose, and we're not going to talk about that today too much today because I know you cover that in another module, but I do want you to keep that in mind as we go through. The second is to build alignment. So for those of you on the call today who have teams or bigger organizations, exec teams, things like that, it's basically about getting everybody aligned around priority and getting everyone on board with a common direction for the business. So that when you're measuring customer experience, it's all that data is serving everybody across the business. The third is engaging employees. How can we give employees the channel and the feeling of psychological safety to share their perspective on what the unmet customer needs are, what the customer experience is, and how we can do things better. The fourth is to measure what matters. So not just to measure generic things like NPS and customer satisfaction that everyone's measuring, but actually to look back at our purpose that we defined and say, how can we measure specifically how we're performing against that? Fifth point is to focus strategy on experience. So this isn't something that is just a tactical 1-year focus in a part of your business. This should be an ongoing strategic focus. And again, we'll talk about that more later. And finally is to connect impact to the actions of your people. So if you have some great customer wins, improvement in customer experience, some great growth and retention and things like that, and you've engaged your employees, then point 3, it's about connecting those wins back to their input and closing the loop on that. So like I said, a broad look at that, but today we're going to, Cindy, you can move on. We're going to focus specifically on those 3 boxes: engage employees, measure what matters, and focus strategy on experience. And we're not going to go through that sequentially, but you'll see elements of all of the 3 of these in what I talk about today. But before we move into that, I do want to highlight that point and about purpose. We won't cover how to do this today, and I know it's part of your program with Business Outcomes Group, but I do want you to keep in mind that having that clear purpose is absolutely critical, because measuring what matters requires you to measure effectively your progress on this windy road. How well are we doing from the customer's perspective on working towards our purpose? And that stops you from measuring generic elements of customer experience and actually be able to get very specific and focus on the moments that matter to differentiate you from your competition. So just before we get cracking, in the chat box, I'd love to hear what you currently measure, if anything, with regards to your customer experience. Drop that in the chat if you could. Anyone measuring anything? NPS, cool, nothing, thanks Nick. Feedback, yeah. NPS, yeah, nothing, great, thanks Rebecca. Nothing. Awesome, Andy, that's really good. We'll come on to that later. So you call customers and ask for feedback, weekly checking goal setting, feedback complaints, NPS, nothing. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. So basically a mixture of NPS, getting feedback and complaints registers, things like that, and nothing, which is completely the landscape we generally see across businesses. The only thing I'd usually add in there is a lot of people measure kind of CSAT and customer satisfaction. Let me just be clear, those things have a place, and I think that they are good kind of overall markers. But what they don't do is differentiate us, because everybody's on the same generic scale, and we can benchmark ourselves against our competitors, but we're not finding out how well we're doing compared to our own purpose, and how we're actually differentiating ourselves in terms of what we want to be known for. So back to that USP point from earlier. So moving forward, we often find that, you know, when we're getting things like NPS, when we're getting data coming from feedback, when we're getting a general kind of customer survey data back, this is the sort of dynamic we see in business leadership and exec teams. There's lots of data, and it's generally on a scale of good to bad in some way, 0 to 5, 0 to 10. But it's very hard to identify where focus should be. And it generally leads to different members of the team wanting to focus on different things. And we've seen, you know, massive spend on things, trend-based stuff like digital transformation, optimizing digital touch points and things like that, because that's the trendy thing to do. And it all comes down to the fact that the data is not pointing us in the right direction. What I'd like to take you through next is a model that is just a good framework for organizing your thoughts around your data, because the two main problems with data the way that it is at the moment is that, one, it's good or bad, a scale of good to bad, and two, it's generic, it's not related to your purpose, as I said. So what I'd like to present to you here is a way that you can start thinking about, if you think about every contact or touch point that your customers have with your business, right? So that goes from, you know, marketing activity, marketing collateral, social media activity, however you engage with potential customers, right through to kind of your lead nurturing and your onboarding, but also their experience of your product or your services over time, you know, your customer services team if you have them, your ways of engaging with the community through kind of emails, EDMs, you know, your office if your customers come there, retail stores if you have them, call centers, stuff like that. So you get the picture. All the potential touch points that your customers could have with you, we want to think about how they map on a framework like this. On one axis, we have impact. So how impactful is that touch point? So that's from everything for the magazines or the pot plants you have in your reception at the bottom, right up to you know, your actual product itself, perhaps at the top of impact. And from alignment, it's really aligned to our purpose and our USP and what we want to be known for, right through to very aligned with that. Okay, so might be worth just sketching this out on a piece of paper as a framework that you can use as a kind of mapping framework later on. But I'm going to take you through now quickly what the 4 segments kind of mean. So first and foremost, if we have touch points that our customers come into contact with that are very aligned with what we want to be known for and are very impactful. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we want to be, let's use an example of Apple. Apple would turn around to me and say, we want to be known for being innovative. We don't copy anyone. We're the first to market with technology. Number one thing, we want to be seen to be the first movers and the most innovative. And probably their most impactful touch points are their products themselves. So the iPhone, the iPad, stuff like that. So if I receive an iPad and I think, wow, I look at it, I turn it over, I'm like, well, it's got this new thing here. What does this do? Oh, wow, it scans my face and then it lets me in, all this kind of stuff. Those are all touch points that would sit in this top right bracket here. It's not about satisfaction or that I like it or not. It's the fact that I think, wow, this is cutting edge and innovative, therefore it's aligned and it's impactful. It's one of their main touch points. So things that we think are up in this quadrant, we want to keep there. So we want to spend time, resources, money, effort on making sure these touch points stay in this top right quadrant. Moving to the next one, this is where we have really misaligned touch points that are highly impactful. So an example of this might be, if you say that you want to be friendly and casual and open and approachable, but someone calls your contact center and the agent at the other end of the line swears at them and hangs up, right? Very, very impactful and very misaligned with what you want to be known for. So we want to spend a lot of time, effort, and resources moving these touch points from where they are to either making them more aligned, making them less impactful, or doing a combination of both. Then we have things in the bottom right, which are aligned but not impactful. So these are touch points that actually do bring to life what we want to be known for. However, at the moment, they're not having a big impact. Customers generally don't remember them, or it's not the thing that they really, an example of this might be your emails you send out, your EVMs that people maybe don't read or they skim through. So it's not, for example, as impactful as your product or service. These play a part in every business. You can think about how you might make them more impactful, or you can just accept that they're there as part of the overall picture. And finally, you've got non-impactful, misaligned touch points. So again, these ones people might not notice so much. They're not necessarily maybe telling the true story of your business, but they're not a massive threat. Yes, over time, you might want to align them more, but they're not as much of a worry as the top left. So generally speaking, you want to focus your time, attention, resources on the top left and the top right quadrant. So I want to take the opportunity now just to get your thoughts on what is it you want to be known for as a business. So if we're going to break away from just measuring NPS and satisfaction and things like that, what would you actually like customers and employees to be saying about your business when you're not in the room? Just drop those thoughts in the chat box. Innovation, great. Quality and safety, fantastic, Martine, thank you. Anything else? Okay, great. Culture. Mark, I'd love to know what sort of culture, fun, innovative, knowledgeable, what sort of culture do you want to build?
We have a motto, have fun, help people, make a difference. So our culture is based around that tagline.
Yeah, great.
So the culture was more to do with the team rather than the customer.
Yeah, and I would suggest, exactly, that's what I was going to say. And I'll show you a model later of, it's very hard to build an internal culture that's separated from your external customer experience, particularly if your customers come into contact with your people. But your people, even if they don't, your people create your products, your people, build your websites and things like that. So the internal culture always finds a way of informing the customer experience. Honest, reliable, value for money. Great, Harry. Rebecca, employer of choice. Why? So this is similar to acquiring and retaining customers. Why would you want employers? Why would you want employees to come and stay with you? What would they stay for? So similar to what Mark was saying about fun. What's your thing?
Yeah, so it's about setting the right culture, but also too, if you've got an employee base that are happy and they're good at what they do, and they feel that they're valued and they're adding value to the business, they tend to operate like they have a stakeholder in that business, which means that is an on-flow effect or a domino effect into the service that they provide, the level that that they go to, above and beyond versus meeting expectations. And I think that starts with value, employee value.
Absolutely. And to me, it sounds, Rebecca, like you're talking about a culture of excellence, about striving, about going above and beyond. So for me, that's those things, right? You would want your employees and your customers to be saying that about you when you're not in the room. So, a culture, we could hang our hat on a culture being fun, or we could hang a hat on a culture of quality. It's not saying you don't do the other things, but it's just what your single-minded proposition about you want to be. what you want to be. So now if we think about all these things, there's been some great ones in there: reliable, quality, fun, going above and beyond, things like that. Now, you don't need to do it on the call today, but I would encourage you to actually start to think through the framework that we just talked about. What are the touch points that my customers can come into contact with? And you can also apply this to employees. What are they all, and where do they sit on that map? Are they currently making customers or employees say that we're fun, or are they not? And is it an impactful touch point or a non-impactful touch point? And again, use that framework for employees and customers. It works just as well for both. Now, while that is a good framework for you to reflect internally and start to hypothesize and map out what your journey might look like, we obviously want to, as much as possible, get the voice of the customer to verify that, and actually start to maybe think about redrawing that map and those priorities based on what the customer says. And there's a number of ways we can do that. And I quickly want to just stress that as we go through these slides here, when we talk to customers, I would really encourage you to try and find out what their perspective of you is in relation to what you've just said you want to be known for. So quality, above and beyond, reliable, fun, easy to deal with, all this sort of stuff. Find out how they perceive you in relation to that as a priority, as opposed to NPS and just generic satisfaction feedback, which you can do as well, but I would encourage you to make that secondary, all right? Because that's a baseline benchmark, making sure we're not falling behind, just keeping up with our competition, whereas understanding how we are traveling in relation to what we want to be known for is how we stand out from our competition. So there's a number of ways we can get the customer's voice, and we'll just quickly go through a few of those. First and foremost, I would get a map of your customer journey. So you can just sketch this out. If you have a team, speak to them, but just start to say, oh, these are the various ways that our customers can come into contact with us. That way you can use that information to backfill your quadrant, which you can just sketch out on a piece of paper. But you can also use it as a way to structure your engagement with customers. When you're trying to get their voice, you can, rather than just understanding their perception of, we found you really fun to deal with, 7 out of 10, or the quality you provided was a 9 out of 10, you can actually start to understand which points in the journey are the biggest drivers of that. So you start to understand which are the most impactful, because you can ask about particular parts of the journey. All right. Probably the most valid and reliable way to get data from your customers is with structured quantitative research, with some data science applied to understand certain things in more detail in a really reliable way. Doing this will allow you, this donut chart you can see at the bottom actually is telling you these are the touch points in your customer journey that are the biggest drivers of the perception of your business. So for example, this one I've used here is something we did for a client. When we went in, they had just spent many hundreds of thousands of dollars on a digital transformation project. They are a like an assessment company. So there's a portal where customers submit their information to be assessed, and they'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars optimizing the experience of that portal. We found out through our research, they wanted to be known as trusted. That was their thing they wanted to be known for. We found through our research that actually the outcome letter at the end of the application process accounted for 70% of the feeling of trust. So it was the biggest driver of the perception of trust in the process. So rather than spending those hundreds of thousands of dollars on the digital transformation, if they'd known that before, they could have spent, I don't know, a few $100s on a good copywriter and someone who knows a bit about empathy, and rewritten their decision letters and saved a lot of money. So I do want to stress that this type of research is expensive and probably requires external help. but it is the most reliable in terms of getting data. But it's not the only way. So if we have a look at another few options, one is qualitative research. And I love that a few of you said that you speak to your customers regularly. It is absolutely critical. And I would say, just to take it to the next level, don't just speak to them generically. Like I said, find out what their perception of you is in terms of what you want to be known, but also find out from them what the most impactful or memorable touch points are that they have with you. Is it your product? Is it your service? Is it your customer support? Is it the information you send them, or the Facebook group that they're part of, or your emails, or whatever? Just find out what the most important parts are. And I've just put this tool up. I'd encourage you to have a look at this. We've just started to use it. It's called Video Ask, and it allows you to record questions on video and push them out to a database. And they just literally have to hit record and record a response. And they can also text or do audio or a number of other things. But it's a really powerful way of just getting yourself out to your customers and getting data at a really affordable, accessible way. So I would encourage you to check it out. It's called Video Ask. Another option is to speak to your employees, particularly employees that are very close to your customer. It's critical when you want employees to share information that you give them, firstly, the channel to share, but also that you build, and this is back to the culture piece, a culture where they feel safe to share. So as you can see here, when you have psychological safety, people are willing to look at mistakes as ways to learn, so we'll share them. They'll try things and be willing to fail and share what they learned. They'll speak up, share their insights, share their struggles and the customer's struggles, and they'll stick their neck out. So that's the sort of culture you want to build, so you can get the voice of the customer through your employees. And really what that is innovation. So I'm going to very quickly skim through this. Apologies for the speed, but I want to give you time for a couple of questions at the end. Effectively, the reason that all of this is important is that, as I said, your business is a collection of touch points. Those touch points get experienced by everybody that comes into contact with them, whether that's customers or employees. When they have those experiences, that forms the beliefs that they have about your business. And their beliefs is what drives behaviors. So things like salaries and price of your product and all these kind of things, and that's people trying to impact behavior through financial incentives. A much more effective way to do it is to influence it through experience to form beliefs, which will change behaviors. Things like discounts and bonuses and stuff like that will only have a short-term effect on behavior. And behaviors inform the results of your business. So all that being said, it very clearly explains why Accenture, as we'll see on the next slide, found that companies that organize their whole business around the delivery of exceptional experiences grow profitability year on year by at least 6 times over their industry peers. And this was found across a macro study. And that's why we call it the experience advantage. So apologies for going a little over. I was hoping to leave more time for questions, but we can probably take 1 or 2 questions with our last couple of minutes, if you have any.
Ross, it's Mark here. Could you just explain the employee, that slide you put up about the employee side of it? Could I see that again and maybe just go over that again? I didn't quite.
Yeah, Cindy, if you want to go up one here, any of these will explain it, but it's basically the fact that it's
further back. The one with the
psychological safety. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Basically, what I'm highlighting here is that people often will have meetings with their employees to ask them how they can do things better as a business. Some businesses don't do that at all, right? They don't ask their employees' opinions. The first thing we see people do as a step is that they'll put a channel in place. So they'll have focus groups or meetings or an email ideas box or an old school ideas box. That's a channel. It's a channel for their employees to say how we might be able to do things better. But more often than not, employees either don't care enough or don't feel safe enough to put a wacky idea out there. They'll think generally that they need to have a fully fledged idea that is brilliant before they can even share it. So it's about creating a culture where you say, look, we don't care about brilliant ideas, or brilliant solutions. We just want to hear ideas. We just want to hear you say, what if? You know, what if we did this? What if we did that? And building a culture where employees understand that if that idea fails, we learn just as much from it as if it was successful, right? So it's a really powerful way of getting another view of your customer, because your customer speaks from their own perspective, whereas your employees have the opportunity to speak from multiple customers' perspective and have internal knowledge and be able to say, customers are very rarely able to say what their unmet need is, right? But employees have an opportunity to say, there is a real unmet need for our customers here. And this is what I think we should do and try. And, you know, you want them to feel safe to share these wacky ideas and stick their neck out.
Thanks.
No problem.
Ross, there was a question as well about sharing the slides.
Yes, I'm more than happy to share the slides. And, you know, again, apologies for leaving only a few seconds for questions, but I'm happy to share slides and I can field any questions offline. There is a scorecard you can take around our model, and that will be in the shared slides as well.
We've got 60 seconds before we boot it out of this room.
Perfect. Well, Cindy, if you want to actually put up that final slide here, the very last one, the one with the QR code.
Oh, here.
Yeah. So we do have a free diagnostic tool around that whole 6-element formula that I presented at the beginning. So if you're interested in finding how you're performing in terms of having the experience advantage, feel free to jump on, take that. And there's an opportunity to book a chat at the end of that. So if you had any questions about your score on the diagnostic, or you just wanted to ask any further questions one-to-one about what I talked today, then feel free to book in via that, and I'll be more than happy to have a chat and go into more detail with anybody that's interested.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Ross.
Thanks, Ross.
That
Thanks,
was
everyone.
really good. Can everyone unmute and let Ross know how valuable that was?
That was great. Awesome.